everyone, happy Tuesday and welcome back to another video. We are continuing with the spring flower theme and making fresh as a daisy today. Daisies have been my favourite flower since my daughter was born just under 3 years ago. Today we're starting by making the embeds, and I have some orange soap dough here which I have kneaded until it's smooth and pliable, and I'm rolling it out into a long tube. This needs to go all the way through my mould, so it needs to be about 12 inches long, and I'm going to make the ends as flat as I can. I'm going to keep rolling that out until it is the right length to fit in my mould. And I'm actually going to use my mould to measure to make sure that it will fit in. Now I have some white soap dough, and I'm going to repeat the same process to make the petals. I'm rolling this soap dough out again into a 12-inch tube. I like my daisies to have around 6 petals on each flower, so I'm going to roll out 6 petals per flower, and I'm making 2 loaves worth. So I'm going to repeat this process 12 times. Do not worry, I am not going to make you watch that. It took me a little while to get all 12 rolled out. But we're going to skip ahead to forming these into petals. Once all of my tubes were formed, I'm just pinching up the tube to form a teardrop shape or a petal shape. These aren't going to be consistent all the way along just because I'm making them by hand. But when you cut through the bar of soap, it will look like a perfect little petal. So you can just see I'm working all the way along this tube and forming the teardrop shape. And this is what they'll look like in the end. Alright, now it's time to start making the soap. So I'm going to start as always with my lye water and my oils at about 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and I'm adding my lye water solution into my melted oils which have been combined with my soft oils. I'm going to stir those in with my spatula so that I don't bring them to trace too quickly because my soap batter does move very fast. And once that's all incorporated and I'm happy, I'm going to start adding my colorants. I'm using indigo powder, the blue version, to get the blue background of this soap. And I'm going to use some zinc oxide for the white. So I'm adding a few teaspoons of the zinc oxide. I have found that using indigo powder, you need to use as much as you need to use to get the blue colour. If you use less, you just end up with a grey tone rather than a lighter blue. So you do need to use a good amount of indigo powder and then lighten it with something like zinc oxide. My soap batter has thickened to a nice thick trace, so I'm going to continue to incorporate that by hand. And I did want to lighten it up a little bit more, so I'm adding some more zinc oxide into this. I'm going to disperse it at first with my stick blender just to make sure it gets fully incorporated into the soap. And once it has been combined into the soap, I'm going to disperse it further by hand with my stick blender and then with a spatula. I have got a nice beautiful light sky blue colour for the background of this soap. I'm thrilled with this colour, so I'm going to go ahead and add my essential oils. And I'm using a blend of geranium, orange and lemongrass. And this is a beautiful, fresh, floral scent. The orange essential oil in there gives it a really nice, sweet undertone, but the geranium has a beautiful floral scent, while the lemongrass just brings a pop of freshness to this blend. This soap smells so good. Alright, that has been fully incorporated into my soap, so it's time to bring in the moulds. I'm going to pour about a quarter of my batter into my soap moulds so that I can place my first layer of embeds into the soap mould and give them something to sit into. You can see that my soap batter is fairly thick, but it is still pourable. I've trimmed down my embeds to the right length, and I'm putting the first 2 petals in, and I'm putting them in at an angle so they'll come close to meeting in the middle. Now that those are in, I'm going to place the center embed in, and I want these to rest on the 2 petals without pushing them too far apart. So I'm just being careful here to make sure that the soap is thick enough to support the weight of the central embed without moving my petals around. And I'm going to go ahead and repeat the same process for the second mold. You can see I'm adding my petals in and my middle soap. I am getting my fingers right in there. I wear gloves, so I want my soap to come out looking beautiful. I'm adding the next layer of soap in, and I'm using a measuring cup to do this so I don't move those embeds around too much. I need to be nice and gentle. So I'm spooning it in with my measuring cup into the places I need it to be, and using my spatula to level it out. Once that's all level, I'm going to go ahead and add the next layer of petals. Now these need to sit around the middle of the central embed, so I'm going to push those into the blue soap until they sit at the right height. But I do need to be careful not to move the embeds around too much that are already in there. Alright, now we have those next layer of embeds in. I'm going to add some more of my blue background soap. Again, I'm using my measuring cup, and as I am going, you can see that my background soap batter is thickening up, so it's holding my embeds in place nicely. I'm going to go ahead and add my final layer of petals, and you can't really see the central embed anymore, but I am pushing these down far enough that they touch the central embed as much as possible. Alright, I have my embeds in place, and it's time to add the rest of the soap on top of this, and I'm using my measuring cup again to make sure that those embeds don't move around, and I'm going to level this out to make sure that I've got an even amount of soap in each mold. Now that that's done, it's time to come back and texture the top of these soaps. I am going to use the back of my spoon, as I usually do, and push the soap from the edge into the middle, but I'm only going to do that on one side. I really want to keep this soap, I want to pipe on top of this soap, and so I'm going to flatten out one side to give me a nice flat surface to work on when it comes to piping tomorrow. Alright, I am back the next day to pipe on top of this soap, and I do apologise, I have lost the footage of me cutting this bar. It did get corrupted, unfortunately. But I am doing a heat transfer method to make the piping to go on top of this soap. So I added my hot lye water to my hard oils and allowed that to soften the oils and start to form the soap. Once that was all combined, I add my liquid oils and stir that in with my spatula. You can see that there are still a few lumps of the hard oils in my soap, so I'm going to transfer this into a smaller container and use my stick blender to break up those lumps. My soap does have a nice white colour, but as it saponifies and cures, it does go a little bit translucent, and I want it to stay a nice opaque white. So I'm going to add a little bit more zinc oxide into this batter and disperse it with my stick blender. And you can see that it does transform it into a bright white colour, and that colour will stay as this soap saponifies and cures. I'm going to keep using my stick blender to bring this to a thick trace. This needs to be about as thick as buttercream because I am going to pipe this soap and I need it to hold its shape. The quickest way to do that is keep using my stick blender. You can see here that I have a very thick trace. It is still a little bit too soft to pipe, and so I'm going to leave it to sit for 5 to 10 minutes to thicken up a little bit more. I have my cut soaps all laid out and it's time to start piping the daisies on top. So I have a small round Wilton piping tip that I'm using today to form the daisy petals, and I'm squeezing more on the outside and releasing the pressure as I come into the middle to give myself a nice petal shape. I didn't want to cut into these daisies, and so I decided not to pipe these before I cut the soaps. I wanted them to be a full flower on each bar of soap. So I'm piping them after the cut, and this soap has set up enough that it will support itself as I go over the edges just a little bit. You can see the more I let up as I move my piping tip into the middle of the soap, the more defined that petal shape is. Piping a daisy is pretty simple and I love how well they turn out. Alright, it's time to pipe the middle of these soaps, so I have taken the white out and added a little bit of turmeric onto them to form the centre, and I'm using the same round tip and forming the middle of the soap. And here are some pictures of what this soap looks like in the end. My petals did move a tiny bit. I love having that giant daisy in the middle of the soap with a cute little daisy right on top. I'm thrilled with this bar. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next Tuesday.